accordingly.
The Russians are at it yet again. At least that's what the reports are saying. It's appearing, according to new documents which have just surfaced from the White House, that Russians have managed to read unclassified emails. Now, that sounds like it doesn't really matter, actually. I mean, let's think about that. They read unclassified emails. Like, so that's like if you read my my open records, of course you can read them. I mean, it's unclassified. Who cares? Well, the issue isn't really that so much as it is how easily penetrable the White House networks appear to be. So a report is now coming out that unclassified emails from Obama to staff have been read by Russian hackers. So on Saturday, the New York Times reported that senior American officials briefed on the investigation confirmed a hack of the White House's unclassified network last year. The breach was more intrusive and worrisome than has been publicly acknowledged, officials said, telling the Times that the perpetrators were likely Russians with ties to the government, if not with direct backing from Russia. Now, keep in mind there it says that the hackers are likely Russians. Now, I'm not a Russian citizen. I'm not an apologist for the Russian system by any means, but it's something that has to be kept in mind. Is they're saying that it's likely Russians or people with backing from the Russian government. Now, again, I'm not an apologist for the Russian government by any means, but there's no cause for undue alarm because remember with the Sony hacks, where Sony Pictures was hacked, Sony Pictures of America, I should say, was hacked by Lizard Squad. And they immediately jumped on the bandwagon saying that it was North Koreans. And everyone with any sort of brain seemed to know that it wasn't North Koreans, but they kept going with that narrative. The FBI said that it probably was North Koreans. And so the media jumped on that angle and said, yeah, North Koreans definitely hacked Sony Pictures. So you see the conundrum which we have here, where they're saying that it's Russians who hacked this network. And it very well could be. But it's no cause to jump on the bandwagon and say that these people were definitely Russians who hacked this network. We don't have proof. We do not know that. So if we don't know something, then there's really no sense in spouting it as though it's truth. So I'll say that it could be that Russians hacked this network, but we don't know for sure. And, you know, tomorrow they could come out with concrete evidence proving that they are. But we don't know that yet. The White House's classified network, on which message traffic from President Obama's BlackBerry is kept, was not breached, but emails he sent to the unclassified network from that device, as well as emails sent from that network to him, were obtained. So the New York Times noted that many senior staffers have two computers in their offices, one operating on a highly secure classified network and another connected to the outside world for unclassified communications. The reason for that is actually most likely because that these are two very different networks in the sense that it's not even the internet. What happens is there's actually sort of a bunch of different networks that we sort of all lump together as being the internet. You know, you have HTTP protocol and you have FTP, and we all branched in that, or we all sort of joined that together as the internet. That's what we think of as the internet here in the civilian side. Well, there's actually quite a few more networks. I'm not sure of the names of them exactly, but I have seen different photos and infographics and stuff that were leaked from WikiLeaks and from the Edward Snowden leaks of PowerPoint presentations, which showed different networks being connected and that sort of thing. And it was a sort of an infograph where it shows, you know, the classic PowerPoint presentation thing where it shows a computer that's connected to a bunch of different networks, and they had names for all of them. So it appears that there actually are different nets outside of our conventional internet, which is actually kind of a genius way of doing it, because if you're completely disconnected from the internet proper, then it's kind of hard to hack. So it's pretty genius, actually. The White House discovered the breach in October 2014 and partially shut down the unclassified email system until the end of the month, when system administrators were sure that the hackers no longer had access to that system. The New York Times also noted that many senior staffers have two computers. So the most highly secure material shared between the White House, the State Department, and the Pentagon and intelligence communities, and that is kept on a system called the Joint Worldwide Intelligence Communications System, or JWICS, and that was not breached. JWICS also gives access to the front end for X-Keyscore, which is a system that collects, manages, and processes the massive amounts of data which is collected by the NSA. Now, on the topic of the NSA, something else has popped up regarding them, and it's really no surprise that there's more news about the NSA. Unfortunately, we keep seeing more stuff popping up about the NSA every day. Well, the CIA, of course, is fully in bed with the NSA. I mean, why wouldn't they be? They're both national organizations, but the CIA couldn't actually fully use NSA spy programs because most analysts didn't actually know about it. It was so top secret that even people in the CIA didn't know about it. Now, that's some pretty high tech stuff. So, a newly recently released document from the Central Intelligence Agency's own internal watchdog found that the government's controversial warrantless surveillance and bulk data collection program was so secretive that the agency was unable to make full use of its capabilities even several years after 9/11. Initially, only top-level CIA officials were cleared on its use, rather than the rank-and-file CIA analysts and targeting officers. So, why is this? Is it some sort of horrible, super secret program that nobody can know about because it's just too powerful? This network is just too powerful for anybody to know about. Well, the document, which a June 2009 report from the CIA Inspector General was released as part of a trove of 747 pages entitled "A Report on the President's Surveillance Program," and was published on Friday by the New York Times as the result of a victory in a freedom of information. It's hard to say. If let me stop and gather myself. A Freedom of Information Act request filed against the Department of Justice, and actually it was a lawsuit. It's always hard for me to say. I don't know why. The CIA Inspector General report, like the others, is redacted in many places, of course, but it does provide some new material as to the specific history, the play-by-play, and internal evaluations of the program. In 2009, the government had previously published a far shorter, unclassified version. Now, it's worth noting also that a lot of these different NSA provisions were allowed for in the Patriot Act, in the initial creation of the Patriot Act. Now, for some odd reason, there are very high-level people who are very staunchly in defense of the Patriot Act, and I'm not sure how this can be. Now, we all know Mitch McConnell's in favor of the Patriot Act. In fact, he's spearheading a project to keep it refreshed until 2020, when I'm going to be very old. I'll be 25. I may as well be dead by that time. So thanks, Mr. McConnell. But it's not just him. It's actually quite a few other people in the same party. Now, you wouldn't think that, but you see, this is where things start to collapse when we start looking at the well, what's a good way to say it? When we start looking at the partisan process, I suppose the partisan process is really quite it's really quite malnourished, I guess you might say, because it's not really sufficient in knowledge. It doesn't really know how to operate properly, and it doesn't know how to operate in a sense that it's operating for the people. The partisan system really just doesn't work. But, I mean, we already knew that, right? I mean, you should have known that. The party system is kind of a collapsed system where it may have worked for a very brief period of time, but now it really doesn't. Why do I bring up the party system? Well, because you have people on both sides of the aisle, I guess if you want to call it that, who are supporting the Patriot Act. You have Republicans who are supporting the Patriot Act, and you have Democrats who are wanting to revive the Patriot Act. Now, fortunately, the Patriot Act is, it seems, just unpopular enough so that it doesn't get brought back in. But the problem with that is that it probably, even if it does get squashed, probably it's just going to come back in another form. That's kind of the problem, where you have this you have, say, a system where the Patriot Act gets totally abolished. But what do you have to replace it? Well, I would say nothing. Don't replace it with anything. But there's going to be people up there who are going to be intelligence community apologists, and they're going to be all, "Ooh, we need to bring it back in. We need to have some form of new way to torture people, or we need some sort of new way to spy on people," and all these sorts of awful atrocities. But it's no surprise that this goes on. It's really something that we shouldn't be really surprised by. Well, Tom Cotton is a Republican. He's kind of a semi-well known. I'll put it this way: I had heard of his name before. So Tom Cotton is a guy who we've all heard about before, most likely, and he is wanting to bring the Patriot Act back, whereas Rand Paul is not. Now, I'm not arguing for either one of them. I'm arguing for my own position, which is get rid of the Patriot Act entirely. It just so happens in this case that that Mr. Paul falls in with that view. I don't agree with him on everything, right? I'm not here to play party apologist or even presidential candidate apologist. That's not my game here, because I don't even believe in the office of president as a viable thing. I don't think that it's a very well-meaning system. So I'm not going to really make any sort of argument for, well, this guy needs to be president and this guy doesn't, because really we're kind of screwed either way, at least in my view. But nevertheless, Mr. Cotton is somehow, I'm not sure how he's managing to do it, but he's trying to argue for a continuation of the Patriot Act as it is now. He wants to keep this going. Well, why? I guess would be the question that I would ask. Why? Well, he thinks that this is a good system because it allows for the continuation of the U.S. surveillance programs, because we need them. Right? We need these surveillance programs. Well, why? That's always the argument, is we need these surveillance programs because otherwise terrorists would be all over the place and we'd all be dead. Well, the problem with that is, remember the old quote from Benjamin Franklin: those who would sacrifice liberty for security deserve neither. I can't think of words today. So if you have sacrificed your liberty for some semblance of security, then you don't really deserve either one. And that's from a view of one of the founding fathers, in fact, somebody who signed the Declaration, somebody signed the Constitution, somebody who was the first Postmaster General. He was not a president. I don't know why people think that he was, but he was not, in fact, a president. He was the Postmaster General. But nevertheless, this is a quote from somebody who was very high up in the system of revolutionizing the North American continent, or at least a big portion of it. And he says, quite frankly, that we do not need security to sacrifice liberty. So why then are people apologizing for that? Or why are people being apologists for this implementation of a Patriot Act so that we can have some semblance of security? Frankly, I don't want that security. That's where people start to get mad. People get very mad just at ideas. People get mad when you have an idea. My idea is that I do not want police protection. I do not want protection from the state. I don't want any of that. I don't. So why do people get so riled up about that? Well, because, people fought and died for that protection. So it's understandable that they're going to get upset, because my saying that, in their view, would sort of attempt to invalidate all the sacrifices which have been made. Well, that's not at all what I'm trying to do, but the thing they fought for isn't necessarily the thing which I want, so it's not even really the same thing. That argument doesn't really apply. Well, Tom Cotton is somebody who fought for his country. He's an Iraq and Afghanistan veteran, and, hats off to him for that, but he's still wrong. Just because you fought in a war doesn't mean you're right about everything. Just because you fought in a war doesn't mean that you know everything about the intelligence community or whatever. Or even, it's not just an issue of intelligence communities and how they work. It's an issue of morality. And it seems that Mr. Cotton doesn't quite understand the implications of what he's trying to push, or maybe he's just being paid enough to not. Well, Tom Cotton is preparing for a Patriot Act battle. And again, I'm not trying to turn this into, oh, Tom Cotton's a terrible person, or, ooh, Rand Paul's the best guy ever. That's not what I'm going for here, because I really don't care about any individual guy. What's this guy going to do? What's that guy? I really don't care. What I care about is the morality of the thing, is the broader issue, which is that surveillance is more or less wrong when it comes right down to it, because it's an immoral system that we keep pushing. We keep pushing this immoral system. It's immoral because people are having their information, quite frankly, stolen from them. And we're still arguing for that. How can you argue for the theft of information? I'm not sure how that can go down, but people are still arguing for that. It's the theft of information for the broader cause of what they call national security, which is something, again, which I don't want. Well, this is Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, AM 1190, and AM 910. We're very liberty-minded people here at Hot News Talk Radio. You can go to our website, which is hotnewstalkradio.com. And if you go to our website on hotnewstalkradio.com, you'll be able to listen to us streaming live anywhere in the world on the website. That's hotnewstalkradio.com. And if you go to Twitter, you can search for Hot News Talk Radio on Twitter, and then you'll be able to see all of our different pithy sort of tweets and political commentary on Hot News Talk Radio on Twitter. Get the TuneIn app and then search for Hot News Talk Radio, and you'll be able to listen to us streaming live to your smartphone over Hot News Talk Radio on the TuneIn app. So search for 1240 WSDT on the TuneIn app, and you'll be able to listen to us streaming live to your smartphone. In fact, if your car has Bluetooth, built into the radio, then you can sync up your phone with that, and you can listen to the TuneIn app, and it'll be like you're right here in the studio with us. Because the audio that streams to TuneIn is actually straight from the studio here. It's not some pass through or whatever. It's not it's not some microphone that's pressed up to a radio. No, it's actually a stream right here from the studio. So you're getting a direct feed from us here at the studio. If you go to hotnewstalkradio.com, or if you go to the TuneIn app and then search for 1240 WSDT. So we're streaming live over those different methods, and it sounds amazing. It sounds really, really great. That's my preferred method of listening, actually. So anyway, Senator Tom Cotton is preparing for a battle against Senator Rand Paul and the GOP's libertarian wing over the USA Patriot Act and the powers of government to conduct spying operations domestically and abroad. Now, some people may take issue with the domestic part. Some people may take issue with the abroad part. I take issue with both parts. The 37-year-old Iraq and Afghanistan veteran who vaulted to the Senate this year after a single term in the House is maneuvering to build support for extending existing surveillance authority for the U.S. government without additional safeguards that civil libertarians want. So to clarify, it's not just that he wants, in addition to this surveillance program, he wants to extend the Patriot Act. No, it's that he wants more surveillance authority for the United States government. Well, the problem is that they don't have that authority, because this is something which breaks the Constitution. The Patriot Act is unconstitutional. It's very clear. It's a violation of the Fourth Amendment. It's sometimes occasionally a violation of the Fifth Amendment, pardon me. And I would argue that it's also a violation of the First Amendment, because knowing that the Patriot Act is in place, you're more likely to hold your tongue in your anti-government views. And so your First Amendment rights are thus being infringed. Simply knowing that you're being spied upon, I would say, infringes upon your First Amendment views, or your First Amendment rights, I should say. So despite the fact that, I mean, he's a young guy, fine. He's an Iraq and Afghanistan veteran, fine. That has no bearing whatsoever on what his views are on surveillance. So he's still wrong. Like despite all his credentials, he's still wrong. He's from Arkansas, and he caused an international firestorm last month with his controversial letter to Iranian leaders. And he spent many recent Fridays in Washington at the FBI National Security Agency headquarters, meeting with senior intelligence officials and administration lawyers to build his case for a clean extension of 3 expiring provisions of the Patriot Act with support of GOP leaders. He's serving as an emissary on the issue to GOP freshmen who are weighing whether to extend the controversial law, and he's seeking to sell his views on surveillance to Republicans from libertarian-minded states through classified briefings conducted by senior intelligence officials. So I guess perhaps he's going to interrogate them in an enhanced manner in order to get them to concede that intelligence is necessary for extension or something along those lines. The problem here, though, the reason I bring all that up is because this is a direct threat to not just people who are going to do the wrong thing. This is a direct threat to us. It's a direct threat to me. It's a direct threat to you. It's a direct threat to everybody. This is an act of war, essentially. This is an act of aggression against liberty-minded people who want to go about their day-to-day business and say what they're going to say and have dissenting views, because this could potentially put you under surveillance. There are provisions within the Patriot Act that would put lone wolf terrorists or suspected lone wolf terrorists under surveillance, even if they're not connected to any form of cell. So this is, of course, they would argue that, well, Timothy McVeigh, he wasn't an isolated incident. Timothy McVeigh was something which could happen yet again. Well, yeah, sure, but the methods which they're using to protect us simply go too far. We are sacrificing our liberty for security, which is something which I don't know why we're doing that. Why are we falling for this narrative that we need the protection of the state, that we need them? I'm not sure why we're falling for this narrative. It's just, what is it? What is wrong with our generation, I guess? Maybe it's not so much my generation, though. I'm a young kind of guy. I'm a hip kind of guy. If you look at the stream on YouTube, I'm wearing a cool hipster shirt. I'm a young, hip kind of guy. But but my generation is seemingly kind of fed up with the whole surveillance initiative that's being pushed on us. We're tired of having things pushed on us. Maybe the older generation has gotten jaded, has gotten complacent, and says, well, it's necessary for the protection of the country. But quite frankly, I don't want that. And I don't know anybody in my generation who does want that. I hang out with a lot of people my age, and all of them are very fed up with the whole surveillance thing. They're just fed up with the idea of this surveillance machine that we need to protect us, right? We're tired of that idea. We are now recognizing we do not need this protection. We do not want this protection. And that's a very threatening idea. And we might be labeled as lone wolf terrorists, or maybe we might be labeled as extremists or anti-state activists, which, maybe we are. But nevertheless, this is what we think. This is our view on things. And no matter what form of coercion they press on us, that's what we're going to continue thinking. And it's frightening what may come about because of this, but I stick to my principles. I am against surveillance, frankly.
This is a mob mode. This is the mob mode. What kind of fool do you think I am? You think I know nothing of
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240. Hi, this is your computer speaking. I don't feel so well. It's like I've come down with a bug, and I'm getting slower.
Affordable Computers. We fix sick computers. Your hometown guys at Affordable Computers will repair your PC in half the time of the big boys at an affordable price. No tricks, no gimmicks, no computer speak technobabble. Just good, quick, and courteous affordable service and repairs. Want to affordably supercharge your PC? Affordable Computers on Highway 58. Affordable Computers hand builds all desktops in-house. If you're looking for a better-than-new refurb laptop, $150 will get you a Dell or another name brand at Affordable Computers. Affordable Computers, Highway 58, between Arby's and Taco Bell. Also Fort O, Battlefield Parkway, near Holcomb's. Affordable Computers, we service what we sell. Call 499-1975. That's 499-1975.
Wow, this is amazing. I'm feeling great. Supercharged.
Do you feel better outside your home or business than in? Indoor air quality is important. Mildew, mold, smoke, water, and rodent damage are prime causes of poor indoor air quality. Ducts Indoor Air Professionals, better known as Duct Busters, cleans HVAC systems using 127 definable Duct Busters steps. Let Mark Thompson address the indoor air quality at your business to help reduce employee illnesses. Prevent fires by cleaning your dryer vents. Mark and his parents, Dick and Joan Thompson, have been building our local economy and helping local people with HVAC systems 16 years. Ducts Indoor Air Professionals. Call 876-9907. 876-9907. Ducks. Call now.
NASCAR, Laura Ingram, Dennis Miller, David Toulis, Generation Z, Coast to Coast AM, and CBS Radio News. Chattanooga's news, talk, and sports leader.
News Talk 1240.
You love your hometown. Are you interested in free markets, in local economy? Do you hope that Chattanooga can survive the next meltdown, the next chain of disasters in the national economy? What's the best way to live out the ideals of self-government and self-determination? Join me, David Toulis, weekdays 1 to 3.
News Talk 1240.
Love your neighbor, buy local.
News Talk 1240.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Fox News Radio, I'm Pat O'Neill. Officials in Nepal now say at least 4,000 perished in Saturday's earthquake. While many Americans worry about friends and relatives there, Barsha Mokhtar near Philadelphia did get a call from relatives.
All that dust from, all the buildings collapsing, all the dust from that, they're breathing all that. So a lot of people are starting to get sick.
At least 3 Americans died in an avalanche caused by the quake. In Baltimore, funeral services being held for Freddie Gray, the man who died from spinal injuries after a week in police custody.
His wake follows weekend protests in Baltimore, where about 1,200 people rallied outside City Hall. A smaller group looted a store, smashing windows and shops and police cars.
Fox Radio's Tanya J. Powers. The Supreme Court's going to hear a case involving websites and other companies that collect personal data. The issue is whether they can be sued for publishing inaccurate information. Fox News, we report, you decide.
News Talk 1240.
If the South would want me to have it made, I'd probably run for president of the Southern state. The day Elvis passed away would be our national holiday. If the South would want me to have it made.
NASCAR, Laura
This is Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, AM 1190, and AM 910. So you can go to our website on hotnewstalkradio.com, and if you listen there, then you can find our high-quality streaming over hotnewstalkradio.com. And if you get the TuneIn app, then you can search for Hot News Talk Radio on TuneIn, and you'll be able to listen to us streaming live over that as well. There's a lot of crazy, cool, different ways to listen to us. And those are only a few, because there's actually a lot of different websites which carry our streams, interestingly enough. So there's a lot of different ways to listen to us, and those are only a mere sampling of the different ways to listen to us. Go to the TuneIn app and search for 1240 WSDT. You can listen to us streaming into your car. If you're out of range, I know it happens. Hey, whatever. You can listen to us over that, and you'll be able to stream our wonderful signal all the way anywhere in the world to your smartphone, to your laptop, to wherever. More advanced car tech is here, whether you like it or not, and it's making some people a little bit antsy, again, possibly about surveillance, but it's also making people a little bit antsy about the maybe the broader implications of advanced technology within cars. Now, this is not something that I'm really that worried about, honestly. I know a lot of people are, but I'm not. I see this as just a extension of what is the future. Really, we are going to be having more advanced technology within our cars. That's just a part of it. That's just a part of progression. And now people got all up in arms when the first Bluetooth radios came to cars, and they said, "Oh, it's just more intrusion into our personal lives." People got mad when there's OnStar, and they said this is just a intrusion into our personal lives. Well, these sorts of services are here to stay, whether we like it or not. They are here to stay. So more advanced car tech is here, and actually buyers are demanding it. So according to Extreme Tech, the new J.D. Power 2015 U.S. Tech Choice study tells us loud and clear where the market is going, or at least where it has been. The most desired are features that have been available for several years and are now reaching the mainstream consciousness. The most preferred include blind spot detection and prevention, night vision, enhanced collision mitigation systems, a camera rearview mirror, and a self-healing form of paint. Conversely, the study respondents say that they have the least interest in health and wellness systems, hand gestures to control the cockpit, a hand gesture controlled seat, biometric driver sensors, and touchscreens. Some of that may be a misunderstanding of what the technology actually does or whether it improves driver safety. Biometric sensors can warn the driver if he or she is, say, intoxicated, or if your heart rate is too high and you're going to die. So it's warning if the driver is also going to get drowsy, just as an example. So it's not necessarily what you might think. It's not like it's a biometric sensor to detect if your heartbeat is going too quickly and you're experiencing road rage, so the car is going to control itself to pull over. That's not what's happening. It's quite different from that, actually. So car features are getting more and more advanced as time is going by. Well, why is that? Well, obviously, it's just because of an extension of the different technological innovations that are making their way into our cars. Now, what about self-driving cars? Well, we already have self-driving cars, actually, in one sense or another. Self-driving cars are readily available for you in San Francisco, where Google is testing them out for driving and for taxi purposes. That's where I really see the future of self-driving cars, is actually in taxi services. Now, I know that's going to make a lot of people mad. It's going to make a lot of taxi services mad. It's going to make potentially drivers for Uber upset. But that seems to be the best course of action for our self-driving cars. It seems to me, anyway, that the best form of use for a self-driving car is actually if we're talking about a taxi service. Now, think about it this way. Let's propose a scenario. You have your smartphone and you need to get somewhere within the city. Let's say you're downtown Chattanooga and you're on, let's say you're south side and you're just now walking out of the Tennessee Aquarium. Now, you want to go to North Shore and you want to go over to, you want to go to Stone Cup. Okay, cool. Great place to hang out, good coffee. All right, awesome. You don't want to walk that far, right? I mean, who does? I like walking the Walnut Street Bridge, but I'm not always in the mood. So that being the case, okay, let's call a taxi. So instead of calling up a taxi service and saying, hey, I'm on such and such and such and such, and I need a ride, instead what happens is you open up your smartphone and you see that there are some taxis available, self-driving taxis available in place. You tap the button to order one. It automatically charges it to your credit card, and the device comes forward and parks in front of you from wherever it has been. And then to get inside, you tap your phone with the NFC chip with your individual ticket number to allow you entry so that somebody doesn't steal your ride. You get inside the car, and it takes you to your destination. And all of that is done with very little hassle. Now, this is sometime in the future, right? This is sometime in the next 5-10 years where everybody's smartphone has an NFC chip, because having that technology would rule out a lot of people. But still, that's a possibility. There's another form of, say, an RFID chip that's in your watch, all sorts of different ways that we could use this technology. But nevertheless, self-driving cars, I think the best application for them would be if a taxi service. So that's most likely, anyway, if the technology continues to trend the way it is, that's most likely what we're going to be seeing. Now, self-driving cars for everybody, I don't want to rule that out initially. I don't want to just say that's never going to happen, because it's very possible that it could. A lot of places, a lot of people don't like driving. Sometimes I don't feel like driving, but I have to go to work anyway. So I usually just psych myself up and say, okay, look, we got to go to work. Let's go. So a lot of people just don't want to drive. There are people who cannot drive because of disability, or because simply their age, they don't have the proper mental faculties to handle driving. Multitasking isn't really their thing anymore. It's fine that they can function in society. Obviously, they can go to the store and that sort of thing, but they really just shouldn't be driving. Their cognitive abilities aren't what they used to be. So there are those people. I know some of those people. Some of my relatives are that way, and that's fine. But it would be better that they have a self-driving car than that they get inside a vehicle and potentially crash and die. Now, this is not something that should be mandated by the state by any means, but this is something which could very well be an option somewhere down the line. So anyway, a man has landed a drone which is carrying radioactive sand onto the Prime Minister's residence over in Japan. So the Prime Minister's office had a slightly radioactive drone land on its office over in Japan. Now, this is Hot News Talk Radio. You can listen to us a lot of different ways. Go to the website on hotnewstalkradio.com, and you can listen to us streaming live over the website on hotnewstalkradio.com. Get the TuneIn app and search for 1240 WSDT, and you'll be able to listen to us streaming live over your smartphone. Go to Twitter and search for Hot News Talk Radio on Twitter, and you'll be able to find us streaming there. Well, not streaming live there, but you'll be able to see all of our different tweets and things on Hot News Talk Radio. So that's definitely worth checking out. That's Hot News Talk Radio on Twitter, hotnewstalkradio.com, and 1240 WSDT on the TuneIn app for your smartphone. So a man landed a drone carrying radioactive sand on the Japanese Prime Minister's office. Now, when the reports initially came out, I heard that they were dropping uranium on the Prime Minister's office in Japan, and I got a little bit worried, but that was not at all the case. That's another case of sensationalist media where there's some awful, dreadful headline like, President sneezes, could he be dying? It's one of those things that you'd find on one of the tabloids of Walmart, where a drone with uranium lands in president's or Japan Prime Minister's office, potentially irradiating thousands. The keyword there being potentially. If I walk outside and I go to the mall and I sneeze and I have a cold, I've potentially given, over the course of the evolution of the disease, I've given hundreds of people the common cold. So it's really not something that's worth really talking about. Well, anyway, a 40-year-old Japanese man has admitted that he landed an unmanned drone in central Tokyo carrying radioactive sand atop the Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's office to protest nuclear power, the police said on Saturday. The drone, which had a sign over it saying that it was radioactive, was carrying a camera and plastic container with sand contaminated with radioactive cesium, the Japanese media said. The police said that the radiation was low and did not actually pose any threat. The stunt initially brought fears of a terrorist attack, but that was not at all the case. Yasuo Yamamoto, who is unemployed, faces a maximum of 3 years in prison if convicted on charges of obstruction of official business. Local media reported that the police said the landing was a protest against nuclear power. Abe is pushing to restart Japan's nuclear reactors, which are offline in wake of the Fukushima disaster caused by a tsunami in 2011. Public broadcaster NHK said that the sand the drone was carrying came from an area near the Fukushima meltdown. So it's something which could be easily had. It's not that this is some rare thing that he bought on the black market. You could go out there easily with a garden trowel and collect some, and there you go. You now have radioactive materials. The drone was discovered Wednesday when new employees were taking a tour of the roof. It was believed to have landed there 2 weeks ago. He says, I was operating the drone around 3:30 in the morning on April the 9th to express my opposition to nuclear power generation. The police quoted the alleged drone operator as saying, Asahi Shimbun said the man surrendered to police on Friday. He allegedly had some of the sand with him, and he was said to have brought the drone's controller as well. Police said the drone was a modified Phantom 2 produced by DJI of China, which doesn't really have any significance because, you can buy those here. It's not that DJI supplied him with one of these drones, and it's not the case. The DJI Phantoms 2 are actually kind of popular, actually, in the drone hobbyist community. I see posts about them all the time in different drone forums. So the DJI Phantom 2 is not like it's supplied to him by the Chinese government in order to blow up the prime minister's office with radioactive materials. That's not the case at all, so don't worry. But it's interesting, though, because now I know there's going to be arguments because of this. There's going to be arguments against the usage or against the deregulation of drones, because what if people can do that? Well, the problem with that idea is that we're talking about prevention. We're talking about laws being passed in order to prevent crimes from ever happening. That's not the proper way the law should be used. Obviously, I mean, we know that, right? Murder is a crime not to prevent murders from happening, but because murder is wrong. Murder is morally wrong, right? Like we can all agree that murder is wrong. There's no disputing the fact that murder is wrong, or that theft is wrong, or that embezzling is wrong, or any of these different things. All these things are crimes because they are morally wrong, not to prevent them from happening. It's simply that if you do one of these things, you have to be tried in a court and punished, because these are punishable acts. This is something which society has sort of agreed upon, and in fact, it's also commanded by God in our view of biblical law as well, that punishment is commanded for any sort of wrongdoing that occurs. Now, there's different forms. There's restitution if you ask one of the family members. There's lots of different ways to avoid the end result of, say, death, if proper compensation is made or that sort of thing. But when it comes right down to it, the idea is that proper punishment should be made. It should not be too lenient, and it should not be too severe for the crime. That's the basic idea. So then when we're talking about drones, the deregulation of drones, people get upset about that idea, and they say, well, people might do such and such. Well, it doesn't really matter what people might do. Okay, let's give an example. Let's say marijuana is legalized, right? And marijuana has a usage as a legitimate painkiller, right? Just as different opioids do. Where, say, have you ever been given Oxycontin because of a toothache? Well, guess what? You're now using an opioid. You're using something that's very similar to cocaine and heroin. So there is a legitimate usage for these different substances. Same goes for marijuana. So let's say that medical marijuana is legalized for medical purposes, but let's just say it's legalized just in general. This is now legal. There are people who are going to use it as a legitimate painkiller, or they're going to say, I have horrible back pain, but this marijuana oil I notice gives me great results, so I'm going to continue using that, just as I would use over-the-counter Tylenol, right? So there's a proper usage for every technology. There's a proper usage for everything. Now, somebody can abuse that, and they can do that. I'm not going to say that they should be thrown in jail for substance abuse, because who cares, really? If this is their own choice, if they want to make that choice, fine. And really, the regulation or deregulation of it will probably actually lead to less abuse in the long run. But anyway, so when we're talking about drones, the same idea applies. This is only a technology. Deregulating these drones and allowing them to be used for commercial purposes, I'm sure probably would not lead to multiple deaths because of drones flying into 747s. Can you imagine if a company flied a drone into some 747 Dreamliner or anything along those lines, and the plane crashed and hundreds of thousands of people died, and now Amazon is being sued, or one of the Amazon drone operators is being sued for many, many deaths and is going to go to jail for a very long time? You see, it's not in the best interest of this company to do something along these lines. So the deregulation of drones for commercial purposes really seems to be just common sense, but we have to now recognize that common sense doesn't really exist. When we're talking about common sense, it differs from person to person. That's the problem, where people will say, well, this is common sense gun regulation. Well, it's not. They'll say this is common sense. Pharmaceutical products regulation, but it's really not, because it's not any form of common sense. The real common sense thing to do would be to deregulate all of these things and say, have at it. But that's not what's viewed anymore as common sense. Thus, it is no longer. So you can't really use that argument and say that this is common sense, because this is not something which would make sense or would be the right thing to every single person. Even though in the States, the deregulation of marijuana is actually a idea which is held by a majority of people. So you could argue that that actually is common sense. And I would accept that argument and say, yeah, you're probably right. But you have a lot of people who are very upset by that idea, particularly neocons are very mad at that idea because they say that, this will lead to a dumb generation. Well, guess what? We kind of already have one. That's the thing. And in fact, I would argue that the previous generation was pretty stupid too. And the one before that one and the one before that one. You have dumb people in every generation. You're not going to have a generation of fools simply because of some regulation of some certain substance. Like, just because heroin is legal, does that mean I'm going to go out and shoot heroin? No, of course not. That would be a dumb thing to do. So it's not that these things are going to lead to a dumb generation in and of itself. It's more society always degenerates as time goes by, and the states always degenerate as time goes by. It's simply the natural process. Each generation is progressively, you could argue, worse than the last one, or maybe not, but just because that's just the progression of things, right? Like, people are going to say, well, this generation is lazy. This generation doesn't do anything. This generation just wants to sit at home and play video games all day. Well, guess what? That's because of all the benefits we have. That's because of all the different systems which the previous generation voted into place. And it's also because the recognition of the total collapse that's incoming of government and financial institutions. So a lot of people just recognize, I'm just going to sit back and wait. That was my view for a long time, where I said, well, guess what? The state's going to collapse. Financial institutions are going to collapse. Why bother doing anything? Right? That was my view for a really long time. But then I realized that there actually is some worth in doing things in local economy. I was thinking too much of a national view. See, that's where my problem That's where my problem resided, is that I was thinking of the national view. I wasn't thinking of, well, I could help my neighbor and do the godly thing. I can help out the guy down the street and buy from his restaurant, buy from his local convenience store, and help him out so that people in my area can be successful. People in my area can live comfortably. I was thinking of a national financial collapse as being incoming and saying, well, if that's going to happen, then why bother doing anything? But actually, no, that's more reason to do something. Because you have this national collapse which is incoming, which is actually, I would argue, a blessing, because now we have this chance to rebuild. You see, we have this wonderful opportunity now where financial institutions are going to collapse. There's no denying that at this point. The state is going to collapse. There's no denying that at this point. But that's a good thing, because now it's an opportunity to rebuild. Or I would argue as the better alternative is to not rebuild and simply continue with a collapsed system where it's best that there be no state. But that's a very fringe argument that not many people are going to make, because they would see that as just far too extremist and not very likely to be accepted. Well, one of the reasons that I see the state as is facing an inevitable collapse is because of the hypocrisy which resides within the state, and really the anarchy which resides within the state. You see, within the state, special rules apply, which is to say no rules apply. You can break the law all day if you're a state figure, and you'll get away with it. That's just how it is. Rule of law does not exist, period. Rule of law does not exist within the state. You simply can't, because you have people who are making the laws, and then they're not even bound by them. You see, that's where the problem resides. That's where one of many problems resides. And people go on all day about, oh, rule of law, my rule of law. They keep going on about that concept of rule of law, when in fact that it's really not an argument worth making, because the people who are constantly yelling about rule of law don't even follow the rule of law. So rule of law is really a null point at this point. The true anarchists are the people who are within the state, because these are the people who don't follow any rules and they do what they're going to do. Now, I do have a slight bit of admiration for that view, but there does need to be some regulation, right? There does need to be some form of governance. Now, I would argue that the state's governance is illegitimate, but God's governance is ultimate. And the governance of the state, or not the state, pardon me, the governance of the church is something which is legitimate because it's sanctioned by God. That would be my view. However, they don't have that view. They see themselves as the embodiment of the law. They are the law enforcement. They are the intelligence agencies. They are the lawmakers. Right? They put themselves on this pedestal, and we ourselves have put them on this pedestal. So now they are allowed to continue on in a lawless manner. Well, the ultimate view of that, the ultimate coming to a head of that, is the former CIA head, and he's getting a no jail sentence for leaking so-called gross hypocrisy. So yesterday, Former CIA Director David Petraeus was handed 2 years of probation and a $100,000 fine for agreeing to a plea deal, or after agreeing to a plea deal, that ends in no jail time for leaking classified information to Paula Broadwell, his biographer and lover. Now, something to keep in mind during all this is that the person formerly known as Bradley Manning, who now must be known as Chelsea Manning, and I'll respect that. From now on, I will refer to him as Chelsea Manning because that is what he wills, and I respect that. So we'll continue on. So Chelsea Manning, of course, was leaking quite a few U.S. government secrets to WikiLeaks, and he's been thrown in jail for a very long time. Why was he thrown in jail, but David Petraeus is not? This is hypocrisy within the state. This is lawlessness within the state. But not many are going to recognize that, and probably quite a few are going to argue for David Petraeus and say that, well, he's a good guy who just did what he thought was right, or he had a slight slip up, or he's a hero because he was a war general, so he should be absolved of any wrongdoing. When really the law should be an unbiased thing, but it's not, because again, we live in a lawless society. So lower level government leakers have not, however, been as likely to walk out of a courthouse applauding the United States as David Petraeus did. Trevor Timm, executive director of the Freedom of the Press Foundation, called Petraeus' plea deal a gross hypocrisy. At the same time, as Petraeus got off virtually scot-free, the Justice Department has been bringing the hammer down upon other leakers who talk to journalists, sometimes for disclosing information much less sensitive than Petraeus did, he's arguing. The Petraeus sentencing came days after the Justice Department demanded up to a 24-year term for Jeffrey Sterling, a former CIA agent who leaked information to a Pulitzer Prize-winning writer about a botched mission to sell nuclear plans to Iran in order to hinder its nuclear weapons progress. So you see, this is a very mind-blowing revelation. This is something that we should know about. You know, we should know what the state is doing with our own money. For those of us who pay taxes, it's something which we should know about. But if it's something that is detrimental to the state, then really this person should be thrown in jail, and he's just the worst human imaginable. I remember in the early days of WikiLeaks, when I was but a lad, I was but a young man when WikiLeaks revelations first came out. And I heard, and I'm not going to name names because I don't remember them, but there were radio show hosts at the time who were saying that that Mr. Assange should be thrown in jail for a very long time for his treason towards the state, because they don't seem to recognize that Julian Assange is actually an Australian, not an American, thus he can't really commit treason against a country which he does not belong. But you hear all these arguments, but with David Petraeus, they're going to say, well, he's a war hero. You know, he should have run for president on the Republican ticket back in 2008. You see, this is a big problem of hypocrisy which we have in the state.
This is a modern world. This is the modern world. What kind of fool do you think I am? You think I know nothing of
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
You do not have to be living with constant pain. You need to make the choice today to enjoy a revitalized body. You deserve to live a better pain-free life. And Dr. Ross can help. At Ross Chiropractic, failure is not an option. For over 40 years, Dr. Ross, a graduate of the prestigious Palmer College of Chiropractic, prided himself in helping and healing. The Ross method of chiropractic care is unique in developing a treatment designed just for you. And Ross Chiropractic makes this promise to you. If he believes that he can help relieve your pain, he will guide you to another health practitioner to assist you. Feel better now. You owe it to yourself. You really do. Call Dr. Ross now at 954-9591. That's 954-9591. And visit Dr. Ross at 7405 Shaliford Road, Suite 320. Ross Chiropractic, helping your body heal itself. Because when your spine's in line, you will feel fine. Call 954-9591. That's 954-9591 for Ross Chiropractic.
Every Tuesday at 11 a.m. on Hot News Talk Radio, join Real Estate U for an hour of information, guests, and new ideas about the dynamic Chattanooga real estate investment market. Real Estate U every Tuesday at 11 a.m. here on Hot News Talk Radio.
If you have the DTs, the shakes, because your phone is on the fritz, you have nomophobia. You need help. Your telecom doctor is in. Cell Surgeon at Northgate Mall. Cell Surgeon yanks open the ribcage of your phone, pries out the dead heart, and puts in the beating life that you lead on your cell phone. Broken screen, phone not charging, water damage,